And we will get started. Katie presented for us yesterday, and I hope that you were able to be here. She has presented for us before. She's amazing. She always has spectacular ideas and things to share with us. So I am so honored that she's here and that she has taken her time to volunteer and come here and share with the rest of us. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce her. She's just amazing.
Thank you.
Dr. Shipley, can you unmute and just, I think there you go. We're with you.
Sure, I can. Okay, sorry, let me start over. Katie loves her work as talent development manager on the people team at Penn Foster College. Previously, she served as an instructor in their early childhood education program, where she shared responsibility for the school's associate degree in ECE, Child Development Associate's Credential Preparation, and Child Care Professional programs. She earned her BS in elementary education from Elizabethtown College and has work experience as a lead teacher in preschool, pre-kindergarten, and kindergarten classrooms, a school owner and administrator, a children's library program coordinator, and she serves as a professional development specialist with the CDA Council. She has presented more than 50 plus unique webinars on topics related to early childhood and professional development. And I can attest to, I have been, not to all 50, but I have been to several of hers, and she has amazing ideas. So we are honored to have you, Katie. So the floor is yours. And we'll do the disclaimers next. So next slide. The first disclaimer just says that an online degree from Ashford University does not lead to immediate teacher licensure and that you will have to go back to your individual state to get certified. Next slide. The next disclaimer just says that Ashford University does not take responsibility for any videos, links, pictures, or information that these share. So Katie, the floor is yours. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be back. And so I just want to basically jump right in. Today's conversation is really about how to leverage and utilize and look for, really seize those everyday opportunities to become leaders in early childhood education, or, you know, whatever profession you're currently in. So we can actually just get started in the questions box, or in the chat box, I should say. Can I ask you please to share with me 3 answers to these questions? My first question, I promise, is going to relate in just a moment to what we're talking about, but can you share with me please your favorite flavor of lollipop? Coconut, I like it. Chocolate, very cool. Cherry, watermelon, lemon, cherry, pineapple, grape, love it, love it, love it. I expected somebody to say Tootsie Roll at this point, but I guess Tootsie Roll could be several of the flavors. Oh, there we go, that we typically, I love it. Thanks all. Let me ask you this question. So if you're still sharing your favorite lollipop flavor, go ahead, continue to do that. Can you share with me 2 descriptors, 2 words for what leadership means to you? If you could pick any 2 words, any 2 descriptors, what would you say leadership is? Oh, we have some good responses already coming in. So guidance, modeling, communication, character. I love that one. Communicating, working together, caring, fun, innovative, aspiring, consistency, strong and kind. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, I love these responses. Respectful, inspirational, supportive, model, go first. Oh, these are fantastic. Thanks, everybody. I have one more question for you. So think about this one for a second. And you can share first names and last names. This could be someone that you know in the real world, in your personal or professional life. It could be, I think sometimes we can say it could be a fictional character. It could be someone famous you've never met yet, someone living or deceased. Who are your leadership role models? Can you name 1 or 2 or 3 people that you look up to and feel are really good leaders? Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Here's what's so great. I think you're all able to see what everyone else is sharing. So if you take a look at where we are right now in that chat box, what we're seeing is, I think, a combination of people who, are very famous leaders, people maybe who have come before our time, people that we've probably not yet met, or haven't met in real life. We're also seeing people who are very close to us. I see us naming parents and siblings and spouses and significant others and teachers and mentors. And I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. If you are still sharing, if you're still thinking, please definitely continue to share those with me. Our conversation today really is about everyday leadership experiences. So here's just a quick snapshot of who I am and where I'm coming from, but I don't want to spend time talking about myself. I really want to be able to share with you, the experiences that I've learned. I will say in my current role, my current professional life, I do get to have a lot of conversations with my colleagues here at Penn Foster about what it means to be a good manager and a good leader. And so I'm bringing a lot of those experiences into our conversation today. Typically in sessions, we know usually our presenter begins with a list of objectives. I like to think of these instead as promises. So I have 3 promises that I'm going to try to deliver on today. And they are, of course, I'm using ECE to outline these. So I'd like for us each to examine what it means truly to be an everyday leader. For us, the C is to challenge our own leadership ideals and models and potentials. And finally, to empower you to recognize and look for those everyday leadership opportunities as well. So examining, challenging, and empowering. And I'm just going to pause here for a quick second and ask you to think about what you want your takeaways to be. And I know that that's kind of hard to do. You haven't yet seen the information I'm about to share with you. We haven't yet engaged in this conversation. And still, it's a good idea to kind of hold ourselves accountable sometimes too. So you don't have to share these in the questions box or the chat box, but maybe just write yourself a note or just pause for a moment and think about why you're here and what you're hoping to learn from our conversation. And if you have those, we'll just jump right in. So today's conversation is framed around a video that I saw about 10 years ago. It's about lollipop moments and everyday leadership. So Drew Dudley is an individual who really first, his first claim to fame was a TED Talk that he did about 10 years ago, back in 2010. You can find it on the TED channel, and it's called Everyday Leadership, although most people don't know that. They think that the video is called Lollipop Moments. Since the video first launched, Drew has amassed quite a cult following, and he does a lot of work in the leadership space. He's written books, Day One Leadership. He has websites. He does webinars and conferences and seminars, and he's a featured keynote speaker. He's absolutely wonderful for so many different reasons. And he doesn't speak just about leadership, but I've found over the years, every time I'm connected with him in some way, I walk away from that experience richer for it. So I just want to share that with you. And I would encourage you, if you have time, maybe today, take a look at that Lollipop Moments Everyday Leadership video. It's only about 6 minutes, not even 6 minutes long. Oh, good. Someone said, I use this TED Talk in all my courses. Love it. Oh, thank you. That's awesome. That's so great. Thanks for sharing that. So essentially what Drew is driving at is that we all, when we see this word leadership, and I think for some of us, especially in early childhood education, if we don't have the designated CEO or school administrator, designated parking space in the parking lot, if we're not driving the most expensive car, if we don't have the title, if we don't have the door, that closes to the office that is exclusively ours, sometimes we can feel like we are not true leaders. And what Drew wants us to do is kind of challenge that notion of what leadership is, recognize that it's not necessarily something that we need to aspire to, that leadership isn't found in big, momentous moments, but instead that it's really our everyday acts. So it's not reserved for others. Leadership is something that each and every one of us is capable of, and not just on the best days of our lives, but really essentially that we're capable of being leaders each and every day in all of our interactions and all of our exchanges. Sometimes we're doing so mindfully. It's deliberate, it's with purpose, it's intentional. And other times it might just be, a byproduct of how we interact and support others as well. And so what Drew came to realize was, and I will let him share the story with you if you haven't seen the video, but he came to realize that in a moment where he offered someone a lollipop, that it was a leadership moment for him. He didn't even know it happened. And the individual who was impacted came back to him years later and said, you may not remember me, but I just want to share that particular moment really changed my life. And so he started to realize how what he calls lollipop moments, these small moments of influence and support and leadership, or these catalysts for others that can be essentially life-changing. And I think an important message here too is, if we sometimes are so focused on how we're influencing others, we might be missing out on, we might be thinking or aiming or have a particular goal or a particular way that we wish to influence others. And instead that influence might be coming about in other ways that we're less receptive to or mindful of. So Drew encourages us to, seek those moments of influence and think about how we can lead others and not be afraid to identify as leaders. And also, really important in this too, is to seek moments of gratitude. And this, I think, is especially important because it helps us to recognize when other people are leaders, when we value their leadership, and that we don't wait to thank them or appreciate them, but instead we speak to it as soon as we're able to, and just let that person know, whether it's day in and day out, or every few weeks or every few months, or the moment that it happens, that we are able to express gratitude to that person for the leadership that they've offered to us. Let them know exactly how they've changed our lives in some small way. So for those of you that already shared in the chat box that your leaders are still with us, especially if it's someone who's close to you, I would encourage you to think today about just how to express that gratitude. Just share with them little moments where they really influenced you, and you've seen them as a leader, and and you value that as well. I tweeted one time at Drew Dudley. This was probably about 4 or 5 years ago, and I just happened to notice that in the U.S., Drew's Canadian, but I happened to notice that in the U.S. it was a date in July. I want to say it was sometime around like July 19th or 20th, maybe. We celebrate National Lollipop Day. And when I realized it was National Lollipop Day, I tweeted at Drew Dudley and said, I just want you to know from a fan, it's Lollipop Day, and I just want to thank you for being a leader. And he was very excited. He didn't even know there was such a thing as Lollipop Day. So I've made it a practice since then, nearly every year. I didn't do it this year, and I should have, to on National Lollipop Day, to thank people who are leaders in my life. So just want to share that with you as well. And again, it's that premise, it's that perspective, that lens of leadership that I really want to carry forward in our conversation today. So I'm going to ask you again in a moment to pause and just kind of be reflective and think about who your heroes and your villains are. This is a self-assessment and exercise where we learn about our own values. We learn about our own abilities and traits and characteristics, sometimes positive, sometimes negative. And I really like using this exercise in leadership development as well. So here's how it works. You've already kind of done this a little bit already. Think about who your leadership heroes are. So instead of asking you today to come up with 3, let me ask you, just for the purposes of time today, to think of 1. So one person who's your leadership hero. You don't have to put it in the chat box if you're not comfortable doing so. Of course, if you would like to share with others, please definitely share in that way. But just think of someone who is a hero, and then take it a step further and identify, what are the 3 things that you especially like about this individual, or in what ways do you see this person as being a leadership hero? Can you describe 1 or 2 or 3 instances where you really felt loved or supported or influenced or guided, inspired by this particular individual? And I'm going to give you a moment to think about this. And it's helpful when we're doing this exercise. I've done this many times myself. Sometimes when I'm doing this exercise as a way of self-assessment in my own work, when I'm thinking about heroes, I'm asking myself now, when I really like this person, when I really like their work or their style, do I like this because I see myself in this? I value that this person has this trait, and I know that I also have this trait. So this is a strength of hers. That's why I like it, because I'm strong in this way too. Or is it the opposite? I really like this person. I admire this person. They have this particular strength. They have this quality or characteristic that I really admire. And maybe I like that because that's something that I'm lacking. I feel like I should be doing a better job of developing. I feel like I'm missing that in myself. So think about that as well. What are the reasons why you have those likes for that particular person? And then when we're done thinking about our heroes, who our leadership heroes are, and it is a really good idea to not only be able to say, this is my hero, but dig deeper and say, and this is why this person is my leadership hero. These are the specific reasons, behaviors, traits, characteristics. But if we move on from leadership heroes, think too about leadership villains. So kind of a contradiction in terms there. Think about people who you think don't necessarily have a lot of strong leadership skills. This could be a colleague, or it could be a manager, it could be a former spouse or significant other, it could be an acquaintance, it could be a character in a television show or a movie, it could be someone who you feel just really doesn't embody those characteristics or those traits. And then we do the same thing again. So we identify, what is it about that person that I dislike? That person makes me feel small. That person makes me feel like they're not actually listening to me. They're always just coming at me to advance their own ideas. This person makes me feel like my ideas are never good enough. This person makes me feel like I can't trust them with information. I feel like they're not looking out for me. They're only looking out for themselves. So when we try to identify, not only, I dislike this person, that's kind of on the superficial level, it's kind of on the surface, but let's dig deeper and think, well, what is it specifically about this particular person that, really goes against everything that I value in leadership? And again, we ask ourselves, so do I dislike this in this person because, I'm really good at this thing and they're not really good at this, and this bothers me that we're so different in this way? Maybe instead we're realizing, I dislike this in this person, and it's actually because I kind of also have this quality or this characteristic, and I dislike this in myself. I'll give you an example. And this isn't me personally saying this. Fortunately, I don't like to gossip. But I've heard people say, doing this exercise, one time a colleague said, I look at this person and I feel like I really dislike them. And when I think about why I dislike them, I realize that as a manager, they're very gossipy. As a leader, as a director, all they do is gossip about one team member to the next, to the next, to the next. My colleague said, I really dislike this, and that to me is not a sign of leadership. And then she got quiet, and I didn't expect her to say this, but she said, and I guess I would say that the reason why I dislike it so much, why it bothers me so much, is because I engage too easily in gossip with her. And that's my connection with her. That's when I feel like that's the only time that we're in alignment, is when we are gossiping about other people on my team. And so it was a really, really valuable exercise for her to be able to see what it is exactly she dislikes. That signal to her, it was a behavior that she needed to change as well. Really good responses. Thank you for being so mindful, so thoughtful. So yeah, we did this really quickly, but this is certainly something that you can take away and devote a little bit more time and attention to. So I'm going to ask you to just think about this. So what did you discover about your heroes and your villains? And you don't have to share this necessarily in the chat box. I'm just going to be quiet for just a quick moment before we move on and just ask you to think about what you noticed. Were there any revelations, anything that surprised you, anything that made you feel uncomfortable, anything that you thought, uh-oh, I didn't know I felt that way? Thanks all for thinking along with me there. Okay, so once we've identified kind of these behaviors and characteristics and traits that we emulate, that we admire, that we want to embody ourselves and continuously get better at, or we've identified behaviors, characteristics, traits that maybe we're not necessarily thrilled with and are not necessarily leading us to be leaders ourselves, the leaders that we know we could be. The next step is starting, stopping, and continuing. So just another exercise. And this isn't limited also to leadership. I mean, this exercise can be used for any number of things. I've been working lately with some of my colleagues who are people managers at the school where I work. And one of our exercises for soliciting feedback from our teams is to ask them to give feedback in a very specific, very guided way using the start, stop, continue method. You're probably already very familiar with this. I think we're using this in many different ways. Let me just go through it really quickly. So you can ask yourself, or you can ask someone else to give you feedback if you have that objective person. What is it about my leadership that you think I should start doing? If you were me, what's one thing that that you would begin to do? Or what am I missing? What am I not doing enough of? What haven't you yet seen in me, in my leadership style, that I need to start doing? And again, this could be something you're answering for yourself. This could be something that you're asking a trusted colleague. This could be something that you're asking a colleague that you don't necessarily trust very well. Sometimes we get some really interesting and valid and valuable feedback from people we work with that we don't necessarily like very much, or we're not necessarily close with either. So think about what's the one thing you can start doing today to bring yourself closer to the leader that you want to be. And then, of course, probably could guess what comes next. It's stop. So what is the one behavior that you need to stop doing? What is the one, is it a way that you waste time? Is it a way that you engage in gossip? Is it a way that you don't have enough confidence in yourself and in your abilities? Is it a way that you feel like you can develop your ability to be trusted more? What is the behavior? What is the characteristic or trait or action that you would need to stop immediately today and not pick back up again in order to really see yourself and have others especially see you as a leader? And if you're struggling with this question, you could, again, always go back to a colleague, a friend, partner, a significant other, a spouse, and ask them to give you this feedback as well. What I like about this technique is we can ask people for very specific guidance. So it's safe to solicit feedback in this way because we don't feel like we're going to have everything, a laundry list of 100 things we need to change about ourselves thrown at us. We're asking for 3 very specific types of feedback: start, stop, and continue. So what is the thing that I'm already doing that you think is working pretty well for me that you think that I should continue? Maybe I can still improve upon it. I can still tweak it a little bit. But what's the thing that you think is already working really well for me that I really should, keep going down that path? And again, this could be something that you answer for yourself, or something that you could ask someone else to help guide you in terms of your leadership. So if it sounds in the next 2 minutes like I'm reading rather than talking, it's because I am. So this morning, as luck would have it, I was looking for something very, very early this morning. I was looking for something related to my actual day job. And I came across an article titled "Self-Leadership is the Productivity Tool that Rewards You." And it's all about this balance between fluffy self-care and self-rigid discipline. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is exactly the piece that I was missing for today's conversation with you all. But that meant that I had to pull apart my slide deck, throw some slides together really quickly. But I just want to share, when we're thinking about leadership, so often we're looking at, how do other people see me as a leader? How can I convince other people that I am a leader? What does it take to be a good leader, a good manager, a good director, a good boss, a good supporter of others? And I just want to touch on this one other point today. This is probably my most important takeaway, is we have to recognize we can't lead others until we can truly lead ourselves. So there was an article written by a woman who, and I can share the link with you to the article as well. So this woman was talking about how through quarantine and the shutdown and COVID and the stress that came with it, and working from home, she found herself in this uncomfortable place where she was making too many purchases too often online. She and her husband had a budget and a goal for debt reduction, and she found herself kind of violating that trust by impulsively, when she was getting upset or she felt depressed, she would go to Amazon and put something in her cart and purchase it, thinking it would make her feel better. And she realized over time she was accumulating all this stuff. She wasn't feeling better, and it wasn't helping them get out of better manage their debt. So she swung to the opposite and really imposed this very strict, rigid self-discipline. And of course, as you can probably imagine, that didn't last very long either. So ultimately what she realized was she stumbled upon a concept called self-leadership, which essentially is the ability to determine big picture needs in any given moment, right now, 5 minutes from now, an hour from now, to be able to constantly recall that big picture need and then steer yourself in the direction, in that particular direction, in this moment, in the now. So it could sometimes be, purchasing a sweater, or getting your nails done, or purchasing, going out for dinner for that favorite meal after a particularly long week. But it could also mean, exercising the self-discipline to not do those things either. So having that careful balance that either way, you're positively influencing future outcomes by being deliberate in present actions. So we can't go to the extremes, be too self-critical or too self-regimented, one way or the other. It's really about taking care of ourselves in a more sustainable way. And I just want to quickly walk through some of my takeaways from the article. One of the techniques that she recommended for self-leadership is picture an imaginary friend with incredible leadership skills. So envision this person. It's a fictional person. Imagine your best friend is the most amazing leader that you've ever known in your life. So picture this mental, image of a strong, competent leader, someone who is able to balance vision with results, and also to do so with compassion and connection. If that person were you, if they were leading you through your day, if they were managing you through your day, what would you look like and what would your day look like? If the answer to what you do in the next hour or this afternoon or for the next day or the next week doesn't actually resemble your true actual day, the author reminds us that it might be time to get a new approach. Again, without the extremes of treating yourself versus punishing yourself. So she goes on to say that it's important to discover our core operating principles to really understand what makes us tick, what makes us work, what really motivates us. So are we motivated by getting a promotion at work? Are we promoted by getting a book published in early childhood education? Are we motivated by having a really good parent-teacher conference? Are we motivated by a pay raise? Are we motivated by completing a course with or graduating with, with all A's? What is it that's driving us and driving our behavior? We need to be in touch with that. We need to be aware of that so that we can get there. The next piece to this, and this is something I had heard years ago. I shared this with my daughter, and every so often we remind each other of this. We've heard about people who are incredibly self-disciplined, that leaders say no to themselves at least 5 times a day on average. And here's what it looks like. I feel like getting a second serving of pizza, and then there's that no. I feel like laying on the couch instead of going for a run, and being able to say to ourselves, nope, you're not going to do that. You're going to put on your shoes and go for the run. It's about having that discipline to make sure that at least 5 times every single day, we mindfully say no to ourselves, sometimes in a big way, sometimes in a small way. And sometimes just that number 5 is the magic number. That's enough. That's all it takes. It doesn't mean that we need to say no to every single impulse throughout the entire course of the day. But also, good leaders don't go entire days or entire weeks without saying no to themselves. And then finally, too, practicing self-compassion. So being mindful and not wanting to, err too much on the side of being rigid and inflexible. This isn't about being all work and no play. It's just about being able to really strike that important balance as well. So let me pause here for a quick second. And this one you definitely don't have to share with me in the chat box. But just think about this. Have you said no to yourself at any point today? Depending on where you are and what time it is. I'm on the East Coast, so for me it's about 1:30 in the afternoon. And I'm going to ask myself this question too. Is there a time where I said no to myself at any point today? I can think of a time that I didn't say no to myself. I walked past a bowl full of candy and there was a Tootsie Roll sitting on top. And I hadn't even had breakfast yet. And certainly I reached over and grabbed the Tootsie Roll and popped it in my mouth before I was even mindfully aware of what I was doing. And I wish that that's a time that I said no to myself. And again, it's not just about what we eat or how we exercise. It's about this self-discipline. Okay, so if you have your no, or even better, if you've identified times today where you could have said no to yourself and didn't, think about ways to say no to yourself several times a day in the most mindful and loving and self-compassionate way in order to move you further down that path of self-leadership. And from here, let's talk a little bit about reflective leadership. Reflective leadership is so much like reflective teaching in the early childhood setting. What I love about teaching, especially in early childhood education, is that we are so focused on continuously learning and growing and evolving as leaders that, we are lifelong learners. We want the young children in our care to be lifelong learners. We know that part of our work and our responsibility is to help instill in them a lifelong love of learning. We want them to be excited about coming to school every day. We want them to feel comfortable and confident and capable in the classroom setting and in themselves, have confidence in themselves as a student and a learner. We know that we need to model for young children what it is we want them to embrace and embody. So we can't just talk the talk. We know that we need to walk the walk, and that we need to constantly be learning and growing and evolving and getting better in our own work and our own practices. And this is its own form of reflective leadership. So we are leading young children in our care, leading families, leading our colleagues, our coworkers, sometimes leading our administrators. So if you don't yet have that top position in your school, in your childcare center, in your organization, if you are not yet the owner, administrator, operator, CEO, the boss, the number one person, it doesn't mean that that these policies don't still apply. We can always, kind of manage up and lead up in any organization as well. So we're thinking about reflective thinking and reflective teaching and reflective leadership, recognizing that it's a critical thinking skill. Many of our, in fact, almost all critical thinking skills seem to focus on what's happening in the present day. So we're using those logical, analytical skills to try to, assess and memorize and recall and study and record and understand and analyze and interpret what's happening present day, because we want to try to predict what we think is going to happen in the future. But reflective leadership means that we are instead pausing in our work, taking a step back, and asking ourselves to think really critically about past experiences so that we can learn and grow from those past experiences, those interactions with children or with their families or with our colleagues, with our own administrators, with leaders in our lives, the people who lead and influence and model for us, those times that we have been recognized for our leadership. Think about those instances where we've already been seen as a leader for others, influenced, supported, cared for, helped others. Think about those experiences so that we can learn and grow from those experiences as well. John Dewey has a famous quote. It's that we don't learn from experiences, which kind of contradicts that, that old adage, that old belief that experience is the best teacher. And John Dewey wants us to recognize that we don't learn from experiences just simply by having an experience. In fact, many of us can have an experience and learn nothing from it. Some of us, it's a good thing you can't see me right now because I have my hand raised and pointing at myself. I, unfortunately, am sometimes the type of individual that I need to have an experience happen to me over and over and over again before I will finally learn a lesson from that experience. So what John Dewey wants us to recognize is that it's the act of reflecting on the experience. When we have an experience as a leader or watching another leader, we pause in our work, we take a step back, we break that experience down into a million little pieces. We interpret and analyze each individual element of that experience. We build it back up to that whole picture again. And then it's the act of reflecting on that leadership experience that shows us how we want to be a valuable leader. So just going through 3 quick techniques, and there are many different ways to engage in reflective leadership practices. Some of these I'm confident that you each and all are already really familiar with. So we'll just take a quick walk through some of these. Before I do, can I ask, can you just put in the chat box if these are things that you're already doing, journaling, mentoring, engaging in professional development? Obviously you all are because you're here today. So you've already got that professional development part totally nailed. But journaling, blogging, mentoring, supporting, coaching others, are these leadership practices that you're already engaged in? Good. Love it. Okay, let's take a quick walk through some of these. So journaling is that act of, sitting down and writing in a diary or a journal or blogging, typing. It just reflecting on our experiences every day or every couple of days, setting a few minutes aside. When we are journaling, we're not focused exclusively on, on things that are going wrong or things that are necessarily disappointing to us. We should be writing about and reflecting on and thinking about things that are really positive, things that are pointing us in the right direction, show us that we're trending in a really good way. So we're thinking about successes, achievements, highlights, compliments, when someone comes to us and tells us that, we've really been an influential role or we've led them in a really good way. We're also mindful of things that maybe aren't going really well for us. We did this already a little bit today in our conversation, but we're being mindful of frustrations and areas where we feel like maybe there's a weakness or a limitation or something really just didn't go according to plan. One thing about this, though, is we know we can't just simply sit down, write everything out in our journal or type everything up in our blog, and then step back and walk away. we need to invest just a few extra minutes, be able to go back, take a look at previous journal entries or blog entries, go back a couple days or a couple weeks, a couple months, a couple years if you can, and ask yourself really critical questions. Who was I as a leader back then, and who am I as a leader today? In what ways have I changed and grown and evolved? In what ways am I still the same person? Apologies for the background noises. In what ways am I a very different person as well? In what ways am I a very different leader? And then use that information to guide us moving forward. Leadership, too, is so much about being able to mentor and coach, and also really important to be able to be mentored and coached as well. So looking out for opportunities to engage in traditional mentoring relationships, someone who has more experience working in the field than we do. Also, there's a lot of evidence to support peer mentorships are really the way to go, because they seem to be safer spaces where we don't have to worry about someone, going back to a manager or a boss or an administrator and, sharing where we're struggling in some particular way. Being able to share with a peer what we're experiencing and gaining from them their advice, their feedback, really important. Think about reverse mentorship as well. So think about inviting someone who hasn't been working in this particular space as long as we have, someone who, and again, this could be early childhood education, it could be a particular skill that you've already developed. Ask someone relatively new to this to give you their feedback, their thoughts, their perspectives, even their questions as well. So thinking about ways that we can mentor and also be the mentor. Of course, we want to make sure that that relationship is reciprocal as a mentor, that we're not just talking about ourselves and talking about how wonderful we are and all of our successes and achievements and highlights and celebrations. We also want to be really vulnerable and talk about struggles, times that we've failed or times that we've made colossal mistakes, and talk about how we've learned from those as well. And then give good guidance and feedback and direction to the people who come to us. So again, a really good way to engage in some leadership and develop some leadership strategies. And then of course, professional development strategies. There are a myriad of these, webinars, workshops, conferences, seminars, trainings, books that we can read, TED Talks that are available to us. I love TED Talks. Podcasts that we listen to, just so many different professional development opportunities. But think about the ones that really support you in your leadership goals. So if you find a leader who you think is really, really wonderful, really influential, find out who their leadership influences are and kind of follow that path all the way to the end as well. We just have a few minutes left in our conversation this afternoon. So I just want to share some other takeaways and strategies with you as well. So this one is about how to master leadership at any age or any stage. And I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly. These come, by the way, from a book called The Art of Learning. And some of these are actually very specific to learning anything, learning any learning process. It could be about chess, it could be about baking, it could be about driving race cars, it could be about, finance, whatever it is. Some of these strategies are very specific to leadership learning principles. So one of my favorites is value the process more than the results. That is a sustained effort and an understanding of each challenge and each gain and each loss, that it's really more important to draw insights from every experience, every interaction, every step, than to really focus on any one particular goal or reward. And this means that we're not labeling ourselves as a winner or a loser or smart or, a flake. It just means that, we value the process more than the results, which we already do this in early childhood education, right? We're good at this because, especially in children's art, we are very good at valuing process over product. So the same should be true of ourselves as leaders. Also, we don't shy away from losses. We allow ourselves to get into those tricky spaces, those messy places. We confront hurdles. We experience losses. We take a good hard look at what happened. We're willing to take a risk and then lose and be uncomfortable with that loss. That we look at things too, not as winning or losing, but winning or learning, which is easier said than done, right? It sounds really cute to say this afternoon, it's either win or learn, not win or lose. Sounds really cute. It is so much harder to apply in the real world, in practice. And yet, really, this is what the best leaders do, is take that particular approach. We should also always have a beginner's enthusiasm. So regardless of what age or stage we're in, we should always look at leadership as if it's something that's new to us, assuming that we don't always have all the answers and that there's always so much more that we can be learning about. We also want to be thinking about, basically how to rethink adversity, how to maintain balance and still be engaged, still be interested, still be joyful, even when things aren't necessarily going our way. To remain present and engaged, to stay focused in the present moment, not get lost in thinking long-term as a leader. So let me go back to that because I feel like that one is actually really important. So this goes back kind of to what Drew Dudley was saying a little bit in his TED Talk, that leadership shouldn't be an end destination. It shouldn't be a title. It shouldn't be a nameplate on a door or a nameplate on a desk. It shouldn't be a business card. It shouldn't be a LinkedIn profile. But it really isn't, it's not about something that we are one day going to aspire to, but that it's something that we engage in every single day. We remain present and engaged as leaders. And then also, and this is, I think, just true in life in general. So I included it in here, being able to shift between stress and recovery, recognizing that, we all go through cycles where we feel like we're really strong leaders and times where we feel like we're really not having an influence. We feel like we're struggling in this area, and just recognizing that, it's a cycle, as is life. Navigating the middle road. We talked about this a little bit already with that self-leadership of making sure that we're taking, a moderate approach, that we're not being too much of one and too little of the other. Being able to master the fundamentals. What this means in terms of mastering the fundamentals is to understand that there is so much literature out there about leadership. So if you're interested in situational leadership, or if you feel like servant leadership is your particular style, to read the books and listen to the podcasts and check out the videos and follow the blogs for individuals who, can coach in those particular leadership styles. So mastering those basics, those fundamentals. And finally, being able to distinguish the macro from the micro, really recognizing that it's better if we go in our approach to emphasize depth over breadth, to resist the attraction to, be superficial in leadership, that we don't want it to be just simply about our title, but we want it to really be about that lasting influence as well. And as we start to wrap up here, just 6 more ways to be and be seen as a leader. Some of these are probably going to be things that are probably really already commonly expected, or things that you're already doing. Face challenges rather than running away from them. We know that the best leaders are willing to engage and face those challenges. To win trust, to create in all of our relationships and all of our exchanges, to have trust in others and build trust in ourselves, means that, we're not doing things like gossiping, that we are being ethical and honest and transparent in all of our interactions, that we are who we say we are in someone's presence, and we are that same person in their absence as well. We also want to think about ways to solicit feedback. If we had another hour of your time today, I would love to have a conversation with you all, just sharing some things I've learned about feedback. It's one of my favorite conversations to have. Can I offer a recommendation, actually, if I may? So there's a book that's been instrumental to me. I've gone back to it many times over the past few years. Oh my goodness, now I can't think of the author's names. Douglas Stone, Stone, and Sheila Heen, Heen. So the title of the book is called Thanks for the Feedback, the Art and Science of Receiving Feedback. Well, giving and receiving feedback, I think it is. So anyway, it's an amazing book. And it's so packed full of very specific strategies. It's almost like a cookbook or a recipe book. It's not about soliciting feedback, processing feedback, accepting feedback, giving feedback. In a theoretical sense, it's really helpful strategies. So definitely check that out if you can. Always be authentic as well. So we know that leaders are really their true selves, and they're not afraid to be their true selves. We know that we can't really be leaders if we're just simply trying to emulate and copy someone else. That we should always be thinking about how to earn respect. And finally, bringing us back to the beginning of our conversation today, as early childhood educators, we're always looking for opportunities to learn and grow. And so we should be staying curious as well. So as our time concludes, I just want to ask you to think about this. It's a new technique I'm trying in many of my conversations. This is actually, so if ever you're leading a meeting, this is a really great way to do a warm-up at the beginning of a meeting or a conversation. It's also a really great way to solicit some feedback at the end or do a survey at the end. I think it's really important to do, especially in this time of COVID, because we're so focused on our health, mental health, physical health. So in many of my conversations with my colleagues lately, I will either begin or end a session by saying things like, so tell me about your lungs. What feels like a breath of fresh air, you know, or what feels like stagnant in the air around you? Or I will say things like, you know, what are your hands holding? What are in your hands right now that you can just simply put down? That's not meant for you to carry. That could also be used for shoulders. You know, what weight is on your shoulders that you just simply want to just give up or ask someone else to carry? So can I ask you in the questions box or in the chat box, can I ask you to just share an answer to one of these questions? Just pick one. Maybe it's brain. What's on your mind? What are your thoughts? What is in your heart? How do you feel about your next steps and as being as an early childhood leader? Or feet. What are your next steps? And where will you move to? I'll give you a moment for that. Great responses coming in already. And then after you've done that, you can move into questions, if there are questions, or not even necessarily questions, but just thoughts, perspectives, advice to share with everyone else in our session as well. So certainly I don't feel like all of the knowledge and all of the wisdom and all of the experiences on my end of the computer screen, recognizing that you also have so much wisdom and knowledge to share too. So please definitely share. Please definitely share with others.
Katie, as you wrap up, I'm just going to stop the recording. I just didn't want to scare you.
Of course.